Shalom. We are here once again with a message from the wisdom of Torah. We are studying today the portion of Teitzei, which is in the book of Deuteronomy, from chapter 21 until the end of chapter 25. Perek Kaf Aleph, Pasuk Yud, all the way to Perek Kaf Hey, till the end of Perek Kaf Hey. The title of the portion is Ki Teitzei, when you go out. And it is the title of the laws referring to going out to war. Ki Teitzei la milchama. These portions, these stories, or these commands are continuing some other portions, parts which also began with Ki Teitzei. We saw in last week's portion, the portion of Shoftim, laws of going out to war. When you go out to war, when you approach a town to fight against it, you should call, you could krav early lachem eleh, the karata eleh shalom, you call it for peace. We saw Ki Teitzei la milchama, v'ra'ita am rav mimcha lo tira mehem. When you go out to war, don't be frightened, don't fear the enormous numbers of the enemies. We saw telling those who have to return back home, a person who built a new house, a person who planted a vineyard, a person who wed a new wife. These are all parts of the laws of the war. Here, in this week's portion, we're talking about the end of the war. Ki teitzei la milchama alavecha v'shavita shivyo. And you come back home with captives. The Torah here in this week's portion has many more laws that refer to the war. We have in chapter 23, in verse 10, Ki teitzei machane al oivecha v'nishmarta mikol davar ra. When you go out with your camp against your enemies, you should guard against any evil matter, which we're referring to something that's impure in terms of the body of a man. Also, you should take along with you, you should prepare a place outside the camp where you go out there when you have to do your various different bowel movements, and you cover it, all your waste matters. We have another law during the war in this week's portion. Ki yikach ish isha chadasha. If a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out the army for a whole year. Naki yeh leveito. He shall be free for his home for 1 year, and he should make his wife happy. V'simach et ishto asher lakach. Many different laws here have to deal with the war, have to deal with the camp, have to deal with human moral behaviors while he is in the camp. It's interesting that the Torah teaches us these laws, while in between all of these laws, we have many other mitzvot, many other laws. This week's portion, as a matter of fact, Ki Teitzei, has more mitzvot than any other portion in the Torah. But the laws that appear here in this week's portion of the Torah are very, very different, have really a variety of different mitzvot. And among them are the laws of the war. We talk about specific laws, and then we go back to the laws of war. We talk about different laws, and we go back to the laws of war. Just give you a few examples. We see in chapter 24, we're talking about a person going out to war, and he has to a person who goes out to the army. In the first year, he has to remain home with his wife, and right away we have a law of referring to the poor. I'm reading in verse 10: if you have a claim against your fellow of any debt, you do not come to his house to take his pledge, meaning you have to refer to him as a human being, even though he has a debt. And if what you have taken from him, that pledge you've taken from him, he needs it to make a living. Let's say in our day, if you take somebody's car away from him, and you actually don't give him an opportunity to pay back his debt. Or lo ta'ashok sachar ani ve'evyon. I'm reading in chapter 24, verse 14. Do not withhold payment. You do not withhold payment from a poor and the needy. Lo ta'ashok sachar ani ve'evyon me'achecha u'migircha asher ba'artzecha. Biyomot iten tzcharo. You have to pay a person's salary on that day that he deserves his salary. And all the laws of war are in between these. We have another law, lo yumtu avot al banim. If a person owes you something, you don't go and punish his parents or his children because of the debt he has. You have to refer to the orphan, to the widow, and you have to remember that you were a slave in Egypt. And the Torah emphasizes the fact that you have to remember that you were a slave in Egypt. And all of this comes when we have humane laws, very, very humanistic laws, and then right in between we have the laws of war. And what is the Torah trying to teach us when they're combining all of these laws together? What does the Torah want? What message does the Torah want us to learn from its wisdom? We know that war is definitely not an ideal for the Torah. We all remember the prophecy of Isaiah, who tells us that in the end of days we will come to a time they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift sword against nations, and they will no longer study warfare. So of course, the ideal situation is when we don't have war. And we are all hoping to arrive at this point. But presently, in the present reality, we sometimes have to go out to war to protect ourselves. We sometimes have to go out to war in God's name to protect, to fight evil, to capture our land. Of course, this is not the ideal situation. But the Torah teaches us that when you go out to war, you are to remain a human being. When you go out to this situation, which is something we don't want to reach to, we very much would prefer avoiding war. But when you go out to war, you don't lose your humanity. You should remember that you were a slave in Egypt. Yes, in Egypt, a slave had no human rights. A slave was referred to as another piece of merchandise, a little more than an ox, something a little more sophisticated than an ox. Actually, it sometimes may work less than an ox. But a slave had nothing, no human character. The Torah tells us, Ki Teitzei, the name of this portion is Ki Teitzei. You're leaving your house. You're going out. Ki Teitzei. You are going out. Don't leave your mankindness. Don't leave your humanity at home. The word of Teitzei, going out, appears in this week's portion many times, because sometimes we have to leave our house. We have to do something outside our house. But when you go out of your house, you are to remain a human being. And the Torah teaches us in this week's portion that even in your camp, you have to set aside a place for a bathroom. You have to remember to refer to your hostage, to those who you've taken as captive, as human beings. Because you are to remember that you were a slave in Egypt. And the Torah teaches us all this by teaching all the laws of a human life, of referring to a poor person in between the laws of war. The fact that you're going out to war, and very often we know that going out to war, you forget all your laws. Everything's allowed. Other nations going out to war would allow themselves cruelty, raping, referring to others without any human rights, referring to others as, and when you're going out to war, you become a soldier and you become a number and you become sometimes like a beast. The Torah teaches us, no, when you're going out to war, even though this is something we don't want to do, even though this is a situation we are forced to do, when you are outside going out to war, you are to remember that God took you out of Egypt. He took you out of, not only of the geographical Egypt, He took you out of the Egyptian mentality. He took you out of the Egyptian mentality and brought you to the land of Israel, that you should bring upon a new culture. A culture where a man is a man is a man, even if he's a soldier. A man is a man is a man, even if he's out in the war. Even if he's in his camp. Even when he refers to his enemy. Even when he refers to the prisoners of war. Even when he refers to others. He has to remain a human being. And this is what the Torah is teaching us. When Moses is preparing the people of Israel, they are about to confront war as they are entering the land of Israel. And the war is a right war, because God promised us the land, and presently in the land we have the Canaanites who are behaving as beasts, as animals, with evil. And we are to bring a message of light to the nations here in the land of Israel. Bringing a light to the nations means remembering that you were once a slave in Egypt, and remembering that you are now a slave of God, and you have the privilege of being a slave of God. And being a slave of God means remembering that you are a human being, even when you are referring to others in the time of war. Shabbat Shalom.